Christmas morning had a way of softening the world, but that year, the light coming through my living room window felt like a cruel spotlight. I was sitting in my armchair by the fireplace when I heard it, Melissa's whisper, sharp as a blade slipping between ribs. After today, we're kicking him out. He won't survive the nursing home anyway. Her voice cut straight through the quiet crackle of the fire. She thought I couldn't hear. She always thought I couldn't hear. My son Andrew stood beside her near the tree shoulders, tense head bowed like a boy, afraid to answer his teacher. Just wait until gifts, she breathed. I'll get him to sign the papers then. Once it's done, we move forward. I didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, I let a small smile curl at the corner of my mouth as I rose slowly to my feet. My joints protested, but my mind was sharper than she ever suspected. I stepped forward, cleared my throat, and said the words that made Melissa freeze mid-sentence. Before I go anywhere, let's watch a special home movie I made. Her head snapped toward me. Andrew blinked in confusion. Lucy, my granddaughter, turned from arranging her doll's presents on the rug and stared at me with wide, worried eyes. I didn't press play, not yet. I let the suspense sit between us like the final breath before thunder. Then someone knocked at the front door. 3 firm, deliberate knocks. A sound that didn't belong to Christmas morning at all. Perfect timing, I thought. The fire popped behind me as I set the remote on the table, letting the question hang in the air. Who had come to visit a family like ours on a day like this? But to understand that moment, the knock, the whisper, and the fear in Melissa's eyes, we have to step back only a few weeks back to the first crack in the illusion she built around my name. 3 weeks earlier, I might have believed her if she had told me the sky was green. Grief can do that to an old man. I was 62. A retired aerospace engineer and a widower still learning how to navigate a house that suddenly felt too big without my wife in it. I had moved into my son's home after her passing because Andrew insisted I shouldn't rattle around alone, as he put it. He meant well. He always meant well. But meaning well and seeing clearly aren't the same thing. Melissa took charge the way she took charge of everything, efficient, graceful, a smile that could disarm strangers and intimidate family all at once. She handled the utilities, the doctor appointments, the grocery lists. At first I was grateful. Then I realized she was handling me. The tone was subtle, barely noticeable. A slower cadence when she spoke to me as if she was afraid her words might outrun my ability to follow. A guiding hand on my elbow, even when I didn't need it. A soft laugh when I questioned something she'd said, followed by, "It's all right, Dad. You don't have to keep track of everything." She'd say it with sweetness, the sort of sweetness that coats the edge of a blade. But I didn't see the danger clearly until the morning I found the document on the dining table. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. I walked past the table and noticed a folder lying open, papers neatly arranged inside as if waiting for signatures. The title at the top stole my breath for a moment. Long-term care authorization. There on the signature line was my name written in a perfectly practiced imitation of my handwriting. My heart thudded once hard. I hadn't signed anything. I picked up the paper, studying the curves of the letters, the way the pen had pressed too hard in places mine never did. Then I heard footsteps and slipped the folder beneath the newspaper on the counter. "Morning, Dad," Melissa sang as she breezed in carrying an overfull laundry basket. "Don't forget your appointment is at 2. Andrew will drive you." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "And what appointment is that?" She hesitated just long enough for me to catch it. "Just a routine checkup. Nothing important." You always forget these things. I didn't forget. She just never told me. Later that day, I walked past Andrew's office door. He was looking at a spreadsheet, rubbing his temples. His life was stretched thin between work, fatherhood, and a wife who managed their entire household like a corporate project. When I asked him if he knew anything about the long-term care document, he frowned. What document, Dad? Nothing, I said. Just something I saw lying around. He didn't push. He rarely did. But that night, when the house grew still and the soft glow from the hallway nightlight lit the floor, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the forged signature burned into my memory. It was the first time I realized Melissa wasn't helping me adjust to loss. She was shaping a story about me, one where I was frail, forgetful, unsafe to live at home, one where she held the pen to write the ending. The next morning brought more small shifts, never dramatic enough to raise suspicion, but deliberate enough that I felt the walls closing in. My tablet wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. I changed the password, Melissa said casually, simplifying things. My mail seemed to arrive already opened. Phone calls from friends grew sparse, and at church that Sunday the pastor touched my shoulder and offered gentle prayers for my clarity and peace. I hadn't told him anything was wrong. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Harriet. She offered me a casserole and a sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry to hear about your memory troubles, Walter. If you need someone to check in on you, just knock." My memory troubles. Melissa had been busy. I thanked Harriet politely and closed the door, leaning against the wood as the truth settled like cold ash inside my chest. She wasn't just painting a picture inside the house. She was hanging it in the neighborhood, framing it, and making sure everyone admired her compassion while believing I was slipping away. But the final nudge that jarred me awake came the day I found the pill blister in the kitchen trash. I was taking the garbage out when I spotted it, a half-crushed plastic packet with my name printed on it, but the drug listed underneath wasn't one I had ever been prescribed. A sedative. Strong, fast-acting. The kind that could make a man mix up days, names, even conversations. I picked it up, turned it over, studied the torn edge. Then Melissa's voice floated in from behind me. "Oh, Dad, you're digging in the trash again. Did you lose something?" She plucked the blister pack from my hand. Must be from my vitamins. You get confused sometimes. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her grip on the blister pack was too tight. And when she walked away, she didn't toss it back in the trash. She slipped it into her purse. That evening, I wrote for the first time in weeks. A simple sentence, a promise to myself. She thinks I'm slipping, but I'm waking up. The truth was no longer a shadow in the corner of the room. It stood in front of me with Melissa's face, sweet voice, and carefully rehearsed concern. If she wanted the world to believe I was losing my mind, then I had to walk a razor-thin line. I had to let her believe she was winning, because only then would she reveal everything she had already taken from me and everything she planned to take next. And so as Christmas approached, I waited. I watched. And I prepared for the moment she would try to end the life I still had left, a life she never imagined I would fight to reclaim. The fog began the very next morning, soft at first, then heavy enough to make me question whether grief had wrapped itself around my mind tighter than I realized. I woke early, as I always did, padding into the kitchen while the house still slept. I reached for the kettle when Melissa appeared behind me, already dressed, already smiling. "Oh, Dad, let me take care of that," she said, gently nudging me aside. "Enjoy the morning. Sit." It was barely 7 yet. Her hair and makeup were immaculate, her voice syrupy sweet. I sat because resisting her had begun to feel like resisting a tide, pointless and exhausting. She prepared coffee with practiced efficiency, humming softly as she stirred. She set the mug in front of me, her eyes lingering just long enough for me to feel the weight of her watching. "There we go," she said. "Start your day right." The coffee tasted normal, warm, comforting even. But within an hour, a thick haze drifted across my thoughts. Words felt slippery. I tried to recall the name of the pastor I'd known for 20 years, and it floated just out of reach. When Andrew came downstairs, cheerful and oblivious, he greeted me with a light pat on the back. "Morning, Dad. You look a little tired." I opened my mouth to answer, but the sentence scattered before it reached my lips. I just didn't sleep right, I finally managed. Melissa stepped in, her voice sorrowful, almost indulgent. He's been forgetting things lately. Poor thing. The phrase stung like salt in a wound. Forgetting things. Poor thing. A label wrapped in sympathy, but sewn tight with judgment. I excused myself under the pretense of needing a rest and went to lie down. The room spun slightly as I lowered myself onto the mattress. All I could think was how wrong it felt, how sudden, how targeted. And yet, when I woke hours later, the fog had lifted completely, as if someone had opened a window inside my skull. By late afternoon, I was writing again in my journal. Fog after coffee. Slurred speech. Better by noon. That night at dinner, Melissa continued weaving her careful narrative. "Dad, you missed lunch again," she said gently. "You didn't hear me calling." I blinked at her. "You didn't call me." She exchanged a meaningful look with Andrew. "See, this is what I mean." Andrew sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Maybe we should adjust your routine a little, Dad. Keep things simpler." Simpler. Another word that felt like a lock clicking into place. Lucy watched quietly from her spot beside me, her fork still in her hand. Her eyes flicked from me to her mother, then back to her plate. Children sense tension before anyone else does, and she sensed something wrong. The next morning arrived like clockwork, and so did the coffee. Melissa placed it in front of me before I could reach for the pot. "Don't strain yourself," she said. "Just relax. We'll handle things from now on." I smiled weakly, lifted the mug, and took a sip, feeling her gaze on me like a hand pushing down on my shoulder. By 9:30, the fog rolled in again. I drifted through the rest of the morning like a man underwater. Andrew asked me whether I remembered where he put his keys. I stared at him, unable to process the question. It wasn't until the fog lifted later that I recalled noticing his keys on the windowsill. I tried again to write in my journal, but my handwriting looked shaky, evidence of the haze that had invaded my mind. I forced myself to write through it a second day. Fog right after coffee. Lifts at noon. Talk to Andrew, no. Not yet. I knew enough to realize that if I spoke without proof, Melissa could spin it. She was weaving a story, and my confusion, manufactured or not, was her strongest thread. On the third morning, I found the Wi-Fi password had been changed again. "Melissa," I said, unable to hide the frustration creeping into my voice, "I can't access my email." She looked at me with the pitying smile of someone soothing a child. "Dad, we talked about this. You kept forgetting passwords, so I simplified things. Let Andrew set it up. Technology can be so overwhelming at your age." At your age. Another needle slipped into the fabric she was stitching. That afternoon, I overheard her on the phone as I passed the hallway. "Yes, Pastor. Pray for his clarity. It's so hard seeing him decline. He wanders at night, forgets conversations. Andrew and I are doing our best." I stopped cold. Wander at night. I hadn't left my room once after midnight. She was planting seeds, watering them, making sure the world saw me as she needed me to be. I walked quietly back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the realization settle like ice in my veins. She wasn't waiting for me to decline. She was creating the decline. Fog, confusion, isolation, sympathy from neighbors and friends. A narrative that fit neatly into whatever plan she was building. On the fourth day, I saw her slip something into her purse before I entered the kitchen, something small white labeled. When she turned, she plastered on her smile again. I pretended not to notice, but inside the alarm bells were ringing like church bells at dawn. She handled all my medications, or so she told the neighbors. She scheduled my appointments. She answered my phone when I wasn't quick enough to reach it. And now she controlled the coffee, the very thing I consumed daily, without question. That night after the house fell quiet, I checked the trash again. Nothing. Then I checked the bathroom cabinet, locked. The key was nowhere in sight. I checked her purse while she showered, heart pounding in my ears. But she had hidden whatever she carried somewhere else. A new hiding place. Still, I found one clue. A receipt tucked between two crumpled tissues. A pharmacy I had never used. A drug I had never been prescribed. Her signature at the bottom. When she walked into the kitchen the next morning with her cheerful expression and cup of coffee in hand, I looked at that mug like it might explode. But I took it, sipped, played my part. That fog returned on schedule, thick, dizzying, cruel. I sat in the living room while Melissa explained to Andrew that I had misplaced the remote 5 times that morning. Didn't I tried to say? But the words came out muddled, the fog too dense. "See," she murmured to him. "He's struggling more every day." Andrew frowned, torn between concern and confusion. "Dad, maybe we should talk to someone. A specialist." I wanted to shout, to shake him, to tell him the truth that was clawing at the back of my throat. But the haze made everything too heavy. My thoughts, my limbs, my voice. Instead, I simply nodded. Melissa placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, as if comforting me. "We love you, Dad," she whispered. But her hand tightened just enough for me to feel the message beneath the softness. "You're slipping. Let me take control." That evening, long after the fog had evaporated and the house had settled into silence, I sat alone in the dim glow of a single lamp. My journal open, my pen steady again. I wrote every detail, every symptom, every lie, every shift in her tone. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. I needed to stay alert. I needed to gather proof. And above all, I needed to let her believe I was the frail, confused old man she wanted the world to see. Because when a predator thinks you're weak, they make mistakes. And I was counting on hers. I didn't plan to spill the coffee. Fate, or maybe something kinder, took the first step for me. On the 5th morning, as Melissa handed me the mug, with her polished smile, my grip slipped. The cup struck the floor and shattered, splattering its contents across the tiles. Her expression faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see irritation break through the veneer. "Oh, Dad," she said too sharply before softening her tone. "You really are getting clumsier." She crouched quickly, her movements tense, gathering the shards with hurried hands. She didn't look at me again until every drop was gone, as if afraid something inside the spill might incriminate her. That day, the fog never came. My mind remained crisp and alert, capable of moving from one thought to the next without stumbling. I read for hours, flipping through an old aviation manual I hadn't touched since retirement. Every term landed exactly where it should in my memory. Every chapter felt familiar, vivid. By early afternoon, I had written a full page in my journal, straight, steady lines, no shaking, no losing track of words. No confusion stealing my place. I didn't need a medical degree to understand what that meant. She wasn't creating the fog with suggestion or manipulation. She was putting something in the coffee. The realization hit like the recoil of a gun, sudden, irrevocable. I stood from my chair, paced once, twice, then forced myself to remain calm. Panic would help her, not me. I needed to think like the engineer I once was. Observe. Test, record. Later that evening, I pretended to be groggy, letting my voice drag as if the fog had arrived late. Melissa seemed satisfied, fussing over me at dinner. "He's declined so quickly," she told Andrew, shaking her head. "It's heartbreaking." Andrew placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get him help." I stared at the mashed potatoes on my plate and let my hand tremble slightly. She watched every twitch, every pause in my movements, collecting each one like an exhibit for the case she was building. I went to bed early, feigning exhaustion, but sleep was far away. I stared at the ceiling, counting breaths, planning the next morning like a man preparing for battle. The plan was simple. Pretend to drink, observe, record, and pray she didn't catch on. When dawn broke, I rose quietly and positioned myself at the kitchen table, with a book open in front of me. Melissa arrived moments later, as if she'd been waiting for me to wake. "Coffee time," she said brightly. setting the mug down with more care than affection. I lifted the cup pretending to take a sip while angling it just enough that the liquid didn't reach my lips. Then, when she turned to wipe the counter, I tilted the mug and poured a small amount into the sink. When she turned back, I exaggerated a sigh, let my shoulders slump. "Thank you," I murmured, forcing a slight slur into my words. Her smile bloomed. "Of course." The fog never arrived. For the first time in days, the morning sunlight didn't blur at the edges. My thoughts didn't float into nothingness. Every detail around me felt sharp, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the faint lemon scent of the cleaner she had used. She came back to check on me around 10. By then, I had positioned myself in the living room, pretending to doze. She hovered over me, searching my face for signs of confusion. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked. I blinked slowly as if trying to focus. "Tired." Her shoulders relaxed. "It's okay. Rest." She walked away satisfied, and I waited until her footsteps faded before opening my notebook. I wrote quickly. "Didn't drink. Felt fine. She's escalating." That afternoon, while she drove Lucy to practice, I checked the pill bottles in the cabinet again. The lock was still in place. But this time I noticed something new. A tiny scratch beside the hinge. As if someone had recently fiddled with it using a tool. I was being monitored even in places I didn't realize were monitored. Later that evening, as she cooked dinner, I caught sight of her reflection in the microwave door. Her expression was tight, focused, almost calculating. A man watching from afar might have thought she was pondering a recipe. But I knew better. She was watching me, studying me, her eyes flicking over my posture, waiting for signs of a man unraveling. I leaned on the counter, letting my voice waver. "What day is it today again?" I asked softly. She turned, triumphant glint in her eye. "Wednesday, Dad. Remember?" I nodded slowly. "Right." She smiled again, the kind of smile a person gives when a plan is unfolding just as expected. That night, after the dishes were washed and Andrew tucked Lucy into bed, I retreated to my room and took out a set of empty jars from a forgotten craft box Eleanor used to keep. She'd once stored beads and buttons in them. Now they would hold something far more important. Evidence. I hid them in my bottom drawer beneath old sweaters. The next morning, Melissa approached with her usual routine. She placed the mug in front of me, watched to make sure I took a sip, then left the room to answer a phone call. Once she was gone, I filled one of Eleanor's jars halfway with the coffee, sealed it, and placed it in the drawer. It was easy the first time, almost too easy. By the third jar, my nerves buzzed every time she walked past the doorway. But I kept collecting samples one by one, day after day, each labeled carefully with the date and time. The weight of those jars in the jewelry box made me feel less helpless, less hunted. I had always been a man who believed in proof, flight, data test results, clean engineering lines. Now I believed in proof for my own survival. But the more evidence I collected, the more closely Melissa watched me. One morning, she placed the mug in my hands and didn't leave immediately. She stood against the counter, arms folded, eyes unblinking. "Go on," she said. "Drink while it's hot." My heart thudded. I lifted the cup to my lips, tilted it just enough to wet the tip of my tongue, then swallowed. She didn't look convinced. "You barely drank any," she said. "I'll finish it," I replied, letting my hands shake slightly. "Just give me a minute." She stepped closer. Too close. "I want to make sure you keep to your routine. It's important." Something cold settled in my chest. Routine, her word for control. Still, I forced a small sip and pretended to grimace from the heat. She backed off at last. "All right. I'm glad you're cooperating." "Cooperating?" As soon as she left the room, I emptied half the mug again and poured another sample into a jar, fingers trembling. By late afternoon, I was exhausted from pretending to be fogged, pretending to forget, pretending to decline. But if I dropped the act too soon, she would know. And if she knew, she might take steps I wasn't ready for. The real breakthrough came thanks to the most unexpected person in the house, my granddaughter. That week, Lucy came into my study with her chessboard tucked under her arm. "Grandpa," she said, her small voice warbling with hope, "can we play?" It had been days since I'd felt clear enough to focus on anything more complex than writing. But that day, without the fog, my mind was sharp. "Of course," I said. We set up the pieces. She moved first, a queen's pawn opening, bold and eager. I responded, falling into old habits, letting the familiar rhythm calm my nerves. Halfway through the match, she looked up at me suddenly. "You don't seem confused," she said plainly. "Mom says you get confused a lot." I froze. "Do I asked quietly. She nodded. "But you're not confused now. You know all the moves. You're playing better than Dad does." Her innocent observation struck me deeper than any accusation could. Children didn't lie. They didn't strategize. They simply saw what was in front of them. And what was in front of her wasn't a man losing his mind. It was a grandfather fighting to keep it. Before I could respond, Melissa entered the room. She took one look at the board, at my confident posture, at Lucy's bright eyes, and her expression tightened. "All right," she said briskly. "That's enough. Grandpa needs his rest. But we just started," Lucy protested. "He's tired," Melissa insisted. "He can't focus for long." She shut the chessboard with a firm snap and ushered Lucy out before I could say anything. I sat alone in the quiet room, staring at the empty chessboard, my hand still hovering where the pieces had been. She wasn't just poisoning my mind. She was trying to erase every sign that I still had one. And if I didn't stop her, she'd succeed. Tom Gallagher showed up on my doorstep the next afternoon, his knock firm, steady, unmistakably his. He'd been my friend for more than 30 years, a retired fire inspector with a sharp mind and a knack for spotting the kind of details most people overlooked. I opened the door, trying to hide the slight stiffness in my hands. Too many mornings of pretending to tremble had made the act feel uncomfortably natural. "Walter," he said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "You look like hell." I tried to laugh, but the sound didn't quite make it out. "Good to see you too, Tom." He studied me, eyes narrowing. "She's not home." It wasn't a question. Somehow, he already knew. "No," I said. "She took Lucy to dance practice." "Good." He walked past me into the kitchen. "Then we can talk." He moved slowly, deliberately, taking in the counters, the sink, the coffee machine. He ran a hand along the edge of the counter as though reading the room like a crime scene. He always had that ability to see stories in the things people didn't say. "What's going on here, Walt?" he asked finally. "Your son called me. Said Melissa told him you were confused. Forgetting things. Wandering at night." I felt my throat tighten. "That's not true." His gaze sharpened. I didn't think it was. We sat at the table. I hesitated only a second before deciding he was the one person I could trust. I told him everything quietly, cautiously. The fog, the coffee, the forged papers, the performance Melissa gave for neighbors. His expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened with every detail. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "All right. First thing, you're not crazy. This is a pattern. Seen it before, mostly in financial exploitation cases. They isolate you, then they build a story around your supposed decline." I nodded. It felt like someone had removed a boulder from my chest. But he added, leaning forward, "I need to know something." "Did you record any of this?" "No." "Then start," he said. "Today." He stood and walked toward the kitchen, pointing at the coffee maker like a general marking a target. "You need timestamps, notes, evidence she can't twist, because people like Melissa, they twist. It's their superpower." I retrieved the small jars I'd hidden in the study. Tom's eyebrows lifted. "You've already started collecting samples?" I nodded again. I didn't drink the coffee. I saved it. "That's good," he said. "Damn good. Make sure they're sealed. Keep them somewhere she'll never check. And get them tested when we get enough." His voice was hushed but firm. "Steady. It was the first time in weeks I felt like I had a partner in this strange, quiet war happening beneath my own roof. When Melissa and Lucy returned, Tom slipped out the back door with a promise, "I'll check in again." "Be careful, Walter. She's building a case against you. You need to build one right back." The moment the garage door rolled open, the air seemed to change. Melissa stepped into the kitchen smiling, carrying Lucy's dance bag. But when she saw Tom's half-finished glass of water on the table, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, annoyance. "You had a visitor?" she asked, voice warm but taut. "Yes," I said. "Old friend, how nice," she replied, though her jaw tightened before she turned away. Later that evening, I overheard her whispering to Andrew in their bedroom. The door cracked just slightly. "He's getting worse," she murmured. "He's forgetting who visited. He told me Tom Gallagher wasn't here, but I saw the glass." I closed my eyes and let the lie wash over me. She wasn't just rewriting my life, she was rewriting my moments in real time. The next day, she moved quickly. She started making my doctor's appointments herself. When I asked which specialist I was supposed to see, she waved a hand. "Just routine checks, memory screenings. You don't have to worry." She said it as if she were soothing a frightened child. At church, she intercepted anyone who tried to talk to me, placing a gentle hand on my back, saying, "He's a little mixed up today, just tired." I wanted to scream, but screaming would only make the story believable. So I smiled vaguely and walked on. The worst moment came 3 days later when a neighbor, Mr. Jensen, stopped by with cookies. He was a retired postal worker who had known my wife before she passed. "How are you feeling, Walter?" he asked kindly. "I heard things have been challenging." I blinked. "Challenging?" He leaned closer. "Melissa told us you've been having episodes. Confusion. Wandering around the block at night in your slippers." My heart dropped. "I never..." He touched my arm. "It's all right. Happens to the best of us." His pity felt like a verdict. That night, for the first time in my life, I felt the sting of invisibility. My truth wasn't mine anymore. She had rewritten it, edited it, polished it, and handed it out like pamphlets to the whole town. But then came an unexpected moment of clarity, delivered in the form of a 12-year-old. Lucy found me sitting on the back porch swing, hands trembling from anger more than age. "Grandpa," she asked, climbing onto the swing beside me. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." She studied me with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Mom says you forget a lot. But I don't think that's true." My breath caught. "Why not?" I asked. "Because you helped me with math yesterday, and you remembered every step. And you always notice things Dad doesn't. And you remember Grandma's stories better than anyone." Her voice wavered. "I don't think you're sick." I looked at her, this small girl with big eyes, holding the truth in her hands like a fragile bird. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." She nodded, leaning her head on my arm. A moment later, the porch door opened. Melissa stepped out. "Time for bed, sweetheart," she said. Lucy slid off the swing and gave me one last look before going inside. Melissa stayed. She didn't speak at first. She simply watched me, watched my breathing, my posture, my silence. Then she smiled, but it wasn't warm. "You shouldn't confuse Lucy," she said softly. "It's important she understands your condition." "My condition," I repeated quietly. She nodded, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "Memory loss? Cognitive decline. You know what the doctor said?" "What doctor?" I asked. "The one you don't remember," she replied sweetly. "See? This is why we need to help you." She walked back into the house before I could respond, leaving me on the swing with the cold truth settling in my bones. Melissa wasn't waiting for me to fall apart. She was pushing, gently, steadily, skillfully. I looked toward the garden Eleanor once tended. The moonlight caught on the frost-covered leaves. Somewhere in the stillness, I felt the first spark of defiance flare inside me. If Melissa thought she could craft my downfall with half-truths and poison-laced kindness, she underestimated the wrong old man. She wanted a story where I disappeared quietly. But I had no intention of disappearing. The pill arrived in the mail on a Tuesday, an ordinary-looking padded envelope tucked among bills and a Christmas catalog. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. I wish I could pretend that life was still simple enough for mail to be nothing but mail. But when I picked it up, the weight of it felt wrong. Too light for something important. Too heavy to be empty. The return address listed a clinic I'd never visited, and my stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a small amber bottle labeled with my name, my birth date, and a prescription I had never been given. Dalmorex. 10 milligrams. Take nightly before sleep. A sedative strong enough to drop a healthy man into near unconsciousness for hours. I stared at the bottle for a long time. Then I unscrewed the cap and brought it to my nose. It smelled faintly chemical, medicinal, familiar in the way hospitals are familiar. Sterile, unsettling. Dad? Melissa's voice drifted from the kitchen light and cheerful. Mail came. I tightened my fist around the bottle. Just junk, I called back, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. Her footsteps approached. Oh, let me see. I slipped the bottle inside my pocket before she entered the hallway. She glanced at the empty envelope on the table and smiled too quickly. Anything important? No, I repeated. Nothing. She gave me one of her soft, consoling looks. You've been having trouble sleeping. I was thinking we might talk to Dr. Halden about something to help. Maybe he sent samples? I've never met Dr. Halden, I said. Her smile didn't falter. Of course you have. You just don't remember. I watched her walk back toward the kitchen, her tone sunny, her steps light as if she hadn't just lied through her teeth. She was confident, too confident. She felt the ground beneath her feet was solid. Good, I thought. Let her believe that. That night, once everyone was asleep, I sat at my desk with the pill bottle resting between my hands. I read the label again and again, each time feeling my pulse hammer harder. Why send this to me? Why now? Because the fog in the mornings wasn't enough. She needed me groggy at night too. Easy to manipulate, easy to accuse, easy to sign whatever forms she put in front of me. I wrote everything down in my notebook line after line until the page filled unsolicited prescription, not from my doctor, not requested. Strong sedative, matches symptoms. Then almost without thinking I added, she's accelerating. The next morning, Melissa glided into the kitchen with a bright smile and my coffee in hand. I pretended not to notice the way she watched me take the first sip. Pretended not to notice how her shoulders relaxed once I set the mug down. Busy day, she said. Your appointment is at 1. What appointment? I asked. She gave the same patient smile she always did. The memory clinic. Remember, I scheduled it for you. I didn't argue. Arguing would only make me appear difficult, disoriented. For now, the goal was to survive long enough to expose her. I took the cup out to the porch as if enjoying the cold morning air. When she disappeared upstairs, I poured half of it into a jar and tucked it away. A few hours later, I sat in the passenger seat of her car while she drove to the clinic. She hummed to herself, tapping her fingers on the wheel. Don't worry, she said, as if sensing my tension. They're very gentle with patients. Patients. Not people. Not fathers. She parked in front of a beige office building with a sign reading Northwood Memory Associates. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and cinnamon candles. A woman at the desk smiled at Melissa, not me. This is Mr. Harper. Melissa said, her tone soft and weary. He's been declining rapidly. We're very concerned. I wanted to speak to tell them I was fine, but Melissa nudged my elbow and whispered, Just let me explain, Dad. Dad. Always that performative sweetness. The evaluation took less than 10 minutes. The doctor asked me questions, but Melissa answered most of them. He forgets meals. He wanders. He gets confused with dates. He misplaces dangerous items. I sat silently through the lies because I had no proof to counter them. Not yet. After the appointment, she guided me back to the car as though I were fragile. When we pulled into the driveway, she sighed dramatically. "You did well," she said. "I know it's hard for you." I turned toward her slowly. "What did the doctor say?" "He thinks you're progressing faster than expected," she replied. "But we'll adjust. I'll help you." Then she touched my hand. Her fingers were warm, gentle, steady. But her eyes were full of victory. That night, I found my pill organizer moved. Not emptied like before rearranged, some pills missing, some added. I sat on the bed with the organizer open in my lap, counting tablets, trying to steady my breathing. This was no longer building a narrative. She was altering my reality. I needed help. But help required trust, and trust required choosing someone who couldn't be manipulated by her charm. The next morning, as Andrew rushed out the door for work, I mustered the courage to speak. "Andrew," I said, "something's not right." He paused, keys in hand. "Dad." "Your wife," I whispered, watching his eyes carefully. "She's doing things. Changing things." He frowned, concern flickering across his features. "What things?" "She's controlling my medication. Appointments, the Wi-Fi, my mail." His brow furrowed deeper. "Dad, Mom is just trying to help." My breath faltered. "Andrew, I know it feels overwhelming," he said gently. "But Melissa's been carrying so much. Let's trust her." "Okay, trust her." He gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder, then hurried out the door. I stood there long after his car disappeared down the street. She had him. Completely. The world tilted not from poison this time, but from the realization that I could not rely on my own son. It made the knock at the back door all the more important. Tom stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Got your message," he said. "What's the emergency?" I showed him the pill bottle. He took it, turned it slowly in his hands, and swore under his breath. "This isn't a mistake," he said. "This is calculated." "I know." He sat at the kitchen table. "Walter, listen to me. You need a professional documenting this. Someone she can't manipulate. Someone who knows baseline cognitive function." I nodded. "But who you trust?" "Dr. Levin, right? The oncologist who treated your wife." The suggestion startled me. Dr. Levin wasn't a memory specialist, but she was ethical, sharp, no nonsense. More importantly, she had known me when my mind was clear. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I trust her." "Good," Tom said, standing. "Call her, today." I hesitated. "And what do I tell her?" "The truth," he said simply. "You're being drugged, and someone is trying to take your life apart piece by piece." He exited through the back again, careful as always. When he was gone, the house felt too quiet. I held the pill bottle in my hands until my fingers went numb. She was escalating, and now so would I. That afternoon, in the small window of time when Melissa was away picking up Lucy, I dialed Dr. Levin's office. When I gave my name, the nurse sounded surprised. "Of course, Mr. Harper," she said. "Dr. Levin remembers you well. She'll see you tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. A lifeline within reach. As I placed the phone back on the cradle, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since the fog began, I felt a path forming beneath my feet. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't confused. I wasn't alone. And tomorrow, I would take the first real step toward proving it. Dr. Levin's office sat on the corner of a quiet medical building, its brick exterior softened by a row of late autumn hydrangeas. I hadn't been there since Eleanor's final months. Walking through those doors again felt like stepping back into a shadow I wasn't ready to face. But I needed someone who remembered me before Melissa's narrative began. Someone who could see the truth beneath the fog she'd manufactured. The receptionist greeted me warmly. "Mr. Harper, it's good to see you. Dr. Levin will be right out." I nodded, clutching my coat a little tighter around my shoulders. My heart thudded, not from fear of what the doctor would say, but from fear of what would happen if she didn't believe me. When Dr. Rebecca Levin stepped into the waiting room, her kind brown eyes softened. She was a small woman with a presence that filled every space. She approached me with unhurried steps. "Walter," she said, taking my hand between both of hers. "It's been a while. I'm sorry it's under difficult circumstances." I swallowed. "Thank you for seeing me." She led me to her office, closing the door behind us. The shelves still held photos of medical conferences, marathon medals, and a framed picture of Eleanor, the one from her last remission. I stared at it a moment too long. "What brings you here?" Dr. Levin asked gently, taking her seat across from me. I took out my notebook and placed it on the desk, flipping to the page where it all began. "Something's wrong," I said. "Not with my memory, with my home." She didn't react with disbelief or pity. She simply leaned forward. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about the fog that came each morning after Melissa handed me my coffee, about the unsolicited prescription bottle, about the forged signature on the long-term care form, about the visits Melissa had arranged without telling me, about how she'd convinced neighbors and my pastor that I was declining. As I spoke, Dr. Levin's expression remained steady, but concern deepened in her eyes. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Walter, none of this sounds like cognitive decline. Your story is coherent. Your observations are detailed. You are aware of discrepancies and patterns." She tapped the notebook. "This is the record of a lucid man." Relief washed over me like warm water. But she continued, "We'll need something objective. Something that no one, not a spouse, not a doctor she enlisted, can dispute." I nodded. "What do we do?" "We start with two things," she said. "Cognitive testing and blood work." The cognitive exam felt almost like a game, memory sequences, pattern recognition, logical reasoning. My mind moved easily, sharper than it had in weeks. When we finished, she sat back. "You performed in the 95th percentile for your age. There is no cognitive impairment that I can see." My throat tightened with gratitude. "Now," she said, taking 3 empty vials from a drawer, the blood test. "You mentioned morning fog. Sedatives metabolize differently depending on dose and timing. If someone is giving you a drug without your knowledge, it could show up here." The needle's pinch barely registered. What mattered was the chain of custody she insisted on. "These samples go straight to the lab," she said, sealing them with printed labels and placing them into a locked box. "No one touches them but the technician. You'll have results in a few days." As I stood to leave, she touched my arm. "Walter, whatever this is, you're not imagining it. And you're not alone." Her reassurance steadied me enough to walk out of the clinic with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. When I got home, Melissa was waiting in the living room, sitting upright on the couch, with her legs crossed and her arms folded. Her smile was thin, brittle. "Long appointment?" she asked. "Long enough," I replied, hanging up my coat. She tilted her head. "You went to Dr. Levin? I didn't schedule that." "I know. I scheduled it." Her eyes flickered just a flash, but I caught it. Distaste, irritation, a misstep in her dance. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose it's good you're being proactive. Did she mention anything concerning—" "No," I said calmly. "Nothing concerning." She didn't like that answer, not one bit. Over the next few days, she hovered more. She watched how I walked, listened to how I spoke, asked me to repeat things I'd said minutes earlier. She took mental notes for the file she was building, the evidence she wanted the world to see. But I was watching too. Every morning she brought the coffee, and every morning I took a careful sip, just enough to satisfy her, before pouring the rest into a jar. By now, the drawer in my room held rows of sealed samples labeled with dates, times, and symptoms. By the third day, she grew suspicious. "You're not finishing your coffee?" she said one morning, her tone too light to be sincere. "Stomach's been unsettled," I replied, keeping my voice vague. "Oh," she stepped closer. "You know, Dad, it's normal for people in your condition to lose their appetite." "My condition," I echoed softly. She nodded sympathetically. "Decline is hard, but accepting help, that's the bravest thing you can do. The bravest thing." She always said things like that, little lines rehearsed in advance, designed to soothe, while she tightened the walls around me. I waited until she left the kitchen, then carefully added another sample to my hidden collection. That afternoon, Lucy wandered into my study carrying her sketchbook. "Grandpa, can I draw here?" she asked. "Of course," I said, grateful for the company. She climbed onto the armchair and began sketching, tongue between her teeth in concentration. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Mom says you're sick," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "What do you think?" she considered. "Mom says you forget things. But you don't forget my stories. And you remember all the chess moves. And you remember Grandma's poems. She told you that I asked." Lucy nodded. "But I don't think you're sick, Grandpa. I think something else is going on." Her words were so simple, so earnest, they almost broke me. I leaned close and whispered, "You're very smart, Lucy. But don't say that to your mother. Not yet." She nodded gravely, as if understanding far more than a 12-year-old should. As evening fell, Melissa prepared dinner with exaggerated cheerfulness. She served my plate last, placing it in front of me with a smile that felt like a trap. "You should eat more," she said sweetly. "You've been losing weight." "I'm fine," I said. She tilted her head, her voice slipping into feigned worry. "We all see it, Dad. You're not yourself." Before I could respond, Andrew entered the room, looking tired from work. Melissa turned to him immediately. "Honey, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we start considering long-term care options. Just in case." A cold chill ran through me. "Already?" Andrew asked, frowning. "He's declining," she insisted, "and we need to think about what's best for the family." Andrew hesitated, torn between reason and the narrative she'd spent months feeding him. I let my hand tremble slightly, playing my part. Melissa reached out, squeezing Andrew's arm. "We need to protect him." "Protect him? From what? From whom? From her?" That night, after everyone was in bed, I took out my notebook. The house was silent, but my pulse thrummed with anticipation. Tomorrow the test results would come in. Tomorrow I would know the truth, not just in my bones, but in science, in data, in numbers that no one could argue with. And then the real fight would begin. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and sat quietly in the darkness. She thought she was tightening the noose, but she didn't realize I was slipping free. The call from Dr. Levin came earlier than expected. I was seated at the kitchen table with my journal open, pretending to lose my place as I wrote while Melissa hovered over the stove. When the phone rang, I felt a jolt run through me. She glanced at the caller ID before I could reach it. "It's Dr. Levin," she said, her tone too casual. "Should I get it, I will," I replied, moving faster than I'd moved all week. I stepped into the hallway and shut the door gently behind me. "Doctor." Her voice was steady, but there was weight in it. "Walter, the lab rushed your results. Your blood work shows a sedative, significant levels consistent with daily dosing. It's not ambient. It's stronger." My breath caught in my chest. "And there's more," she continued. "The dosage appears to have increased in the last several days." Cold fingers crawled up my spine. "So I'm not imagining it." "No," she said, "you're not. Someone is drugging you." I leaned against the wall, gripping the phone. The hallway seemed to tilt. "Walter," she added, "you need to be extremely careful. Do not confront anyone directly, not yet. Keep documenting, gather whatever you can. I'll prepare an official report and secure these findings. But you must act like nothing has changed. Act like nothing has changed. Pretend to be confused. Pretend to be slipping. If Melissa suspected I'd regained clarity, she would pivot, and I didn't know what her next move would be. "Thank you," I whispered. "We'll get to the truth," she replied. "You're doing everything right." When I stepped back into the kitchen, Melissa looked up with faux curiosity. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just scheduling another appointment." She nodded slowly, studying my face for cracks. I kept my expression slack, letting a hint of confusion veil my eyes. "Sit down," she said gently. "Your coffee's getting cold." I drank just enough to satisfy her. By mid-morning, I felt steady, clearer than I had in weeks. Clarity sharpened the edges of my fear, but strengthened my resolve. Tom came by shortly after lunch, pretending it was a casual visit. He entered the kitchen, nodded politely at Melissa, and clapped me on the back. "Walter, let's get some air," he said. Melissa frowned. "Oh, he's too tired for walks today." Tom smiled pleasantly. "Well, I'm not. Thought I'd steal him for 5 minutes." Before she could protest, he guided me through the back door. Once outside, he lowered his voice. "What did she say?" "She said someone is drugging me," I whispered. "And the dose is increasing." Tom's jaw tightened. "Then you've got to gather more than jars. You need a witness. Something undeniable." "I know," I murmured. "But how she watches every move I make." Tom nodded toward the house. "Technology is cheap these days." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small black device the size of a golf ball. "A camera," he said. "Motion activated. Cloud upload. If she's tampering with your food or drink, it'll catch her." I held the small device in my palm, feeling its weight, its potential. "Where do we put it?" I asked. "Somewhere she'll never notice," he said. "Where she does her work." "The kitchen." That evening, after Melissa went upstairs to give Lucy a bath, Tom re-entered through the back door. He moved with the quiet steadiness of his old inspection days. We positioned the camera inside the cabinet behind Eleanor's porcelain teacups, angled directly toward the counter where Melissa prepared my morning coffee. We tested the connection. A green light blinked once, then disappeared. "Working." When Tom left, he clasped my shoulder. "Stay alive," he said. "You've got more brains than she thinks." I watched him walk down the driveway and vanish into the dusk. Inside the house was warm, cozy, deceptively peaceful. I had to behave as though nothing had changed. I played the role. At dinner, I let my fork clatter once or twice, feigning tremors. I asked Andrew twice what day it was. He answered, gently, sympathy clouding his eyes. Melissa watched, satisfied. "Oh, Dad," she murmured, "we're doing everything we can." But underneath that soft tone was a sharpness she didn't bother hiding from me anymore. Later that night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. Floorboards creaked, pipes hummed faintly. Somewhere down the hall, Lucy laughed in her sleep. I thought of Eleanor, how fiercely she'd protected our little family, how she would have marched into this house with fire in her eyes if she could see what Melissa was doing. "You'd be proud," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm fighting." The camera recorded the next morning with perfect clarity. At 7:42 a.m., Melissa walked into the kitchen alone, hair neatly pinned, expression composed. She opened a drawer, removed a small white bottle, and placed it on the counter. She glanced behind her before crushing 2 pills with the back of a spoon. At 7:43, she scraped the powder into my mug. At 7:44, she added cream, stirring until the mixture turned a uniform pale brown. And at 7:45, she whispered to herself, "By New Year's, he'll be ready." That voice, low and triumphant, chilled me even as I watched the footage on my laptop hours later. It was the proof I needed, undeniable. When she handed me the mug at breakfast, she beamed. "Drink while it's warm." I took a sip, one small, careful swallow, and nodded. "Thank you." She didn't notice my hands were steady. She didn't notice my eyes were clear. She didn't realize her performance was being recorded from behind porcelain teacups. But she did notice something else. That afternoon, she caught me writing in my notebook again. "What are you always writing?" she asked, her voice falsely light. "Just thoughts," I said. She stepped closer, brow furrowing. "Let me see." I closed the notebook slowly. "It's private." Her mask slipped just slightly enough for me to see the irritation beneath. "People with memory issues shouldn't hide things. We're here to help you." "I'm fine," I said gently. "You're not," she shot back. Her voice was no longer soft. "You're slipping, Walter, and I'm trying to keep the family safe. Andrew is drowning trying to care for you. I'm doing everything. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with anger. "You should be grateful." "Grateful?" I forced myself to remain calm. "Thank you," I said quietly, giving her the submission she craved. She exhaled, calming herself. "Good. Thank you." She walked away satisfied. I sat in my study, shaking not because of her threat, but because the camera had captured the truth she so desperately tried to hide. That evening, Lucy peeked into my room just as I closed the laptop. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom's been sad today." I nodded. "Yes, she's under a lot of pressure." Lucy climbed onto my lap. "I heard her telling Dad you're getting worse." I closed my eyes. Did he believe her? "I don't know," she said softly. "But I don't believe her." The sincerity in her voice cracked something inside me. I hugged her gently. "You're a smart girl, Lucy." She looked up. "Are you going to be okay?" I smiled at her, real soft-tired. "I will be. I promise." She squeezed my hand. "Good." That night, after the house went quiet, I replayed the footage again. Watching Melissa crush the pills. Watching her stir the poison. Watching the triumph in her smile. I uploaded the file to a secure drive and labeled it plainly, Day 1, Sedative Poisoning, Evidence. Then I turned off the lamp, letting the room fade into darkness. She thought she was preparing to lock me away. She didn't realize I was preparing to expose her. And morning by morning, jar by jar, recording by recording, the truth was becoming too loud for her lies to contain. The morning after I captured Melissa on camera poisoning my coffee, the house felt different, charged, brittle, as if the walls themselves were listening. I woke earlier than usual, unable to quiet the thrum of adrenaline humming under my ribs. Today wasn't a day for caution. Today was a day for truth to begin stepping out of the shadows. I dressed quietly, careful not to wake anyone, and slipped into the kitchen. Dawn light filtered through the window, turning the countertops pale gold. I stared at the coffee maker, the battlefield where she tried to dismantle my mind, one mug at a time. Not today, I thought. When Melissa appeared in the doorway, she wore her usual bright smile, but the corners twitched slightly. She was studying me again, always studying. "Up early, Dad," she said. "Did you sleep all right?" "Well enough," I replied. "Just thought I'd get some air." "Oh, but you can't go out yet," she said quickly. "Let me make your coffee first. You shouldn't go wandering without something in your stomach." She brushed past me, reaching for the mug she always used for me, the blue one with the fading map of the Great Lakes. Her fingers grazed the ceramic with practiced familiarity. Control lived in those hands. I forced a small chuckle. Of course. I watched her prepare the coffee. She moved naturally, confidently, humming a quiet tune. But I noticed something new. A tension in her shoulders, her eyes flickering toward me at intervals. The faintest tremor in her wrist. She was afraid. Good. When she placed the mug in my hands, I lifted it slowly, inhaling the scent. I took the minimal sip she expected, feeling the burn on my tongue, then lowered it again. "Thank you," I murmured. She watched me drink, watched every movement, waiting for the fog to descend. But it wouldn't. Not today. When she turned to wipe the counter, I tipped the mug over the sink and emptied half. My hand was steady now, with practice. A jar waited in my study drawer, labeled and ready. At 9:30, when Melissa expected the fog to roll in, I let myself sag into the armchair in the living room, eyes half-lidded, voice soft and vague. She checked on me twice, satisfaction spreading like warmth across her face. By noon, she was convinced. I had her right where I needed her. That afternoon, after she left to run errands, I retrieved the camera footage from the cloud and sent a secure copy to Tom. He replied within minutes. "Good. Keep gathering. She'll make mistakes now." He was right. The more confident she became, the sloppier she grew. Later that evening, as we all sat at the dinner table, Melissa began her performance with renewed enthusiasm. "Dad," she said gently, "remember I told you about the safety evaluation we'll need to do? A home visit, just routine?" I blinked at her, letting my expression remain blank. "No, I don't remember." Her smile widened. "See, that's exactly why we need it." Andrew, exhausted from work, rubbed his eyes. He'd begun to look worn, carrying invisible burdens Melissa handed him with practiced softness. "Maybe it's a good idea," he mumbled. "Just to be safe. Safe for whom I wanted to ask." But I kept my head bowed, my shoulders drooped. Melissa turned to Lucy. "Sweetheart, why don't you go wash up?" Lucy hesitated, glancing at me. Her eyes flickered with something quiet and understanding, fear maybe? Or doubt? But she obeyed and left the table. When the girl was out of earshot, Melissa lowered her voice. "We need to get ahead of this, Andrew. The confusion, the wandering. It's not safe for Lucy. Or for him." My fork paused in midair. Wandering. She used that word again. She wanted it on record. She wanted witnesses. Andrew sighed. "I know you're trying, Melissa. I really appreciate everything you're doing." Of course he did. She made sure of it. She placed her hand over his. "I just don't want something bad to happen. I want us to protect our family. All of us. All of us. Except me." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at my desk beneath the dim glow of the lamp. I opened my notebook and wrote fast and furiously, needing to get every detail down before dawn swallowed it. Date, time, dosage pattern, behavioral manipulation, clinic visit outcome, scheduled evaluation, video file titled Morning Poisoning Day. Then I turned the page. Tomorrow, capture repeated behavior, confirm escalation. But I wasn't ready for what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Melissa brought the coffee with unusual eagerness. She placed it on the table and didn't move away. "Aren't you going to drink?" she asked. "I will," I murmured. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching. I understood instantly. She was testing me. I lifted the mug and took a careful sip. Enough for her to see, not enough to harm me. She watched until the mug lowered again. Only then did she turn away. 2 minutes later, she approached again. "You didn't drink much. Let me warm it up." My heart thudded once. She never offered to warm the coffee before. I shook my head gently. "It's fine." "No," she said sweetly. "I insist." She reached for the mug. I tightened my grip. The moment stretched between us, quiet, taut, electric. Her eyes sharpened. "Let go, Dad. You'll spill it." Slowly, deliberately, I released the mug. She smiled faintly and carried it back to the counter. The camera recorded her every movement as she turned her back to me, uncapped the bottle, and crushed 2 more pills. When she handed the mug back, her smile looked almost triumphant. "That's better," she said. "Now drink, all right?" I nodded, took another tiny sip, then pretended its warmth soothed me as I eased into the chair. The fog did not come. But she thought it did. She thought she had won again. That afternoon, as Andrew took a phone call in his office, I overheard Melissa in the hallway speaking to someone in a low voice. "Yes, I've been increasing it. No, he hasn't noticed. He's getting slower." "Yes." "The facility said they can take him after New Year's." We just need 2 more evaluations. Of course, Andrew trusts me completely. No, he won't be a problem. I held my breath. A facility. Not a short-term care center, a long-term one. She wasn't planning to move me. She was planning to discard me. When she hung up, footsteps approached and I slipped back into my study, pretending to stare blankly at a crossword puzzle. She peeked inside, her voice turning syrupy sweet again. Dad? Need help with that? No, I murmured, letting the pencil slip from my fingers. Just tired. She smiled with gentle triumph. I know. It's okay. Later, when the house quieted, I reviewed the camera footage from the morning. There it was, a second dose clear as day. The footage time-stamped. Her voice audible when she muttered, "This will do it." My fingers buried in my hair, I exhaled shakily. She wasn't just framing me. She was drugging me more aggressively each day. I emailed the footage to Tom, my hands trembling. His reply came within minutes. This is enough to go to the police, but we need the timeline solid. Keep collecting. She's close to making her final move. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding with both hope and dread. A door creaked behind me. I snapped the laptop closed and turned just as Lucy stepped inside. Grandpa, she whispered, rubbing her eyes. Mom was crying downstairs. She said, things are getting worse. I swallowed hard. Is that what she said? Lucy nodded. She said you'll have to go away soon. My breath froze. She sat beside me, her small hand wrapping around mine. Is she telling the truth? She asked. I looked at her, this child who saw through more than any adult in the house. No, I whispered. She is not. Her eyes widened with fear. But don't tell her you know, I said softly. Not yet. She nodded, brave and trusting, and hugged me tightly before slipping back to her room. When she left, I looked at the silent house, the shadows stretching across the walls like fingers. Melissa thought her plan was almost complete. But she didn't know the camera was watching. She didn't know Tom was watching. She didn't know Dr. Levin was watching. And she didn't know that I, her quiet, supposedly confused father-in-law, was watching her closer than anyone else. The storm she was building was about to break. And this time she would be the one standing in its center. The day Melissa tried to tighten the circle around me began quietly, almost tenderly. Dawn had barely touched the windows when she appeared in my doorway, her silhouette framed by the soft hallway light. Morning, Dad, she whispered with a gentleness that felt rehearsed. Rough night. I blinked slowly, pretending disorientation. I don't remember. She stepped inside, her smile widening. That's okay. I'm keeping track. That's what family does. She handed me my slippers, something she'd never done before, and guided me toward the kitchen with a hand on my back. Her touch felt possessive, not caring. I shuffled like she expected me to, giving her the performance she wanted. In the kitchen, the mug was already waiting. The blue one. Always the blue one. I sat, exhaled shakily, and watched as she fluttered around the room with artificial warmth. Andrew's leaving early today, she said. Important meetings. He won't be home until late. Translation, I'd be alone with her. She set the mug in front of me. Drink while it's warm. I lifted the cup, letting it touch my lips without swallowing, then set it down again. She eyed the level. More than that, Dad, she murmured sweetly. Reluctantly, carefully, I took another small sip. Enough for her to believe I had surrendered to routine. Enough to keep the illusion alive. She turned to throw away a paper towel. I emptied half the cup into a jar I'd hidden beneath my robe, screwed the lid tight, and slid it up my sleeve. When she turned back, I let my gaze wander, unfocused, toward the window. Perfect. She smiled, satisfied. At 9:30, she checked on me in the living room. I feigned a drooping head, let my jaw slacken slightly. She watched closely, waiting for fog to bloom behind my eyes. See, she murmured to herself. It's working. But the fog never came. I spent the entire morning pretending to be a slower version of myself, moving, gently, speaking haltingly, letting silence stretch between sentences. Beneath it all, every sense sharpened as I listened, watched, gathered. Just before lunchtime, I heard her on the phone again, whispering in that low, urgent tone she used when constructing a narrative. "Yes," she said, "he's declining quickly." "No, he won't fight it. He's barely aware anymore. I'll file the evaluation after Christmas. Yes, he'll be ready." The words "ready" made bile rise in my throat. Ready for what soon I would learn. An hour later, she asked me to sit at the dining table while she organized holiday paperwork. She laid out stacks of documents, bills, insurance forms, school flyers for Lucy. Then she placed one new folder on top, a red one. "This," she said, sliding it toward me, "is something we'll review soon. Don't worry about it right now." Inside, I glimpsed the top page, my name neatly typed next to the words, "Power of Attorney." My stomach twisted. "What's that?" I asked softly, blinking in practiced confusion. "Oh, nothing you need to stress about," she murmured, covering the page. "We'll handle it together." She patted my hand. The gesture felt like a shackle. It was becoming harder to hide my fear. But fear had to take a back seat. I had work to do. When Melissa stepped out to make a call, I rose slowly, pretending to stretch my back, and slipped into my study. I pulled out the collection of jars, nearly 10 now, filled with cooled coffee tinted slightly with whatever she'd been mixing into them. I placed today's jar at the front of the line. The faint chemical smell drifted upward when I opened the jewelry box. It made my eyes sting. Evidence. Proof. Truth she couldn't rewrite. I tucked the box away as footsteps approached. Melissa appeared in the doorway, face tight. "What are you doing?" My heart jumped, but I kept my tone mild. "Looking for my glasses." She stared at me for several long seconds. Then she smiled. Too quickly, too brightly. "Be careful, Dad. You know how easily you get turned around." I nodded, letting my shoulders slump, playing the part. But I saw something new in her eyes, suspicion. I'd pushed too close to the line. That afternoon, something changed in the air. Andrew came home early, his forehead creased with tension. He pulled Melissa aside in the hallway, thinking I couldn't hear. "Mel, this is too fast," he said quietly. "The facility's paperwork, the evaluations, you're pushing hard." "We have to," she replied, frustration leaking into her whisper. "You saw him this morning. He could hurt himself, or Lucy, or us." "I didn't see that," he said. "Well, you're not looking," she snapped, before softening her tone. "Honey, I'm trying to protect us, all of us." Her voice held a tremor, fear of losing control. I crept back to the living room, settling into my chair just before they entered. "Dad, huh?" Andrew began gently. "How are you feeling?" I blinked at him, then looked away. "What day is it?" I asked, adding a slight waver to my voice. Andrew shot Melissa a worried glance. She looked triumphant. He sighed heavily. I think Melissa's right," he murmured. "You need help." My heart cracked, but I kept my expression vacant. Lucy came in moments later, cheerful as sunlight, unaware of the storm brewing. She sat beside me on the couch, swinging her legs. "Grandpa, want to play a round of cards?" she asked. Melissa stiffened. "Not now, sweetheart." "Grandpa's tired." "I'm not," I said softly. Melissa turned sharply toward me. "No, you need rest." The firmness in her tone made Lucy's eyes widen. She climbed off the couch and scurried to her room without another word. That night, when the house was finally still, a knock came at my study window. 3 soft taps. "Tom." I opened the window a crack. "You shouldn't be here." He slipped inside. "Had to check on you. Got your footage." "And it's damning," he said. "But we need more 2 or 3 incidents at least. Enough to show pattern, not accident." "There's more on the camera today," I said. "Good," he replied. "But listen, she's moving fast. You need extra eyes on your side." I frowned. "Who?" "A lawyer," he said. Someone who specializes in elder exploitation. I stiffened. I didn't want to believe I needed that, but I did. I know someone, he continued. Margaret Hayes. She's tough as nails. If Melissa tries anything legal before we're ready, Hayes can shut it down. I nodded slowly. All right. He squeezed my shoulder. One more thing. Don't eat anything she prepares unless you're collecting samples. And never let her see you clear. Not until we have a plan. I exhaled. I'm playing a part, Tom, but it's getting harder. His eyes softened. I know, but you're close. Very close. He slipped out through the window, disappearing into the night. I turned back to my desk, opened my notebook, and added new entries. Escalation in dosing. Increased monitoring, red folder, POA. Andrew influenced further. Lucy noticing inconsistencies. Tom's warning. Then I added a final line. Tomorrow I contact Hayes. The next morning before Melissa came downstairs, I dialed Margaret Hayes' office from my cell phone. A receptionist answered. Hayes Law Group, how can we help? I need to speak with Ms. Hayes, I whispered. It's urgent. It's about elder abuse. The receptionist's tone shifted immediately. We can schedule a phone consultation today at noon. What's your name? I hesitated. Then I said it clearly, firmly reclaiming something Melissa had tried to weaken. My name is Walter Harper. Mr. Harper, she said gently, Ms. Hayes will call you at 12 sharp. I hung up and exhaled. Just in time, because at that moment Melissa appeared at the bottom of the stairs, eyes narrowed, smile thin. There you are, she said. Why are you up so early? I swallowed hard. She didn't know. She couldn't know. Just couldn't sleep, I murmured, letting my voice tremble. She walked toward me slowly, studying my face for cracks, for clarity, for any sign that I was slipping from her control. But I wasn't slipping. I was waking up. And soon she would learn that the man she thought she'd broken was the man quietly preparing to burn her entire scheme to the ground. Melissa didn't know I had an appointment that morning, and that was the only reason I made it to the neurologist's office alive. She believed she controlled every inch of my schedule, my sleep, my meals, my behavior. But not this. Not the packet of proof I kept hidden under the loose floorboard in my study. Not the phone call I made to Dr. Alan Halden's office, posing as a confused old man, whose daughter-in-law insisted he needed help. She didn't know I'd set the trap. But she knew something was off. She watched me more closely that morning as she handed me the coffee. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes were sharp as glass. Drink up, she murmured. You'll feel steadier. I lifted the mug, took the smallest sip, then let my gaze drift unfocused toward the morning news playing on the TV. I let my mouth slacken and my shoulders droop. I gave her the picture she wanted, the one she needed for whatever paperwork she planned to file today. She stood there longer than usual, studying me. Then she leaned in and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. Poor Dad, she whispered. You're slipping so fast. I didn't respond. I let silence answer for me. Andrew, she called toward the stairs. We need to leave in 10 minutes. My appointment with Halden was at 9, but Melissa thought I was going with her to a memory center meeting, the one she planned to record as another checkmark in her running list of decline symptoms. Instead, Andrew walked in holding his phone, confused. Wait, I thought we were going tomorrow. Melissa froze for a breath. She hated when the script didn't go her way. No, honey, she said sweetly. Today. Dad's getting worse. We can't wait. I stood slowly, gripping the back of the chair as if for balance. Are we going somewhere? She smiled at me with exaggerated patience. Yes, Dad. I wrote it down for you. She handed me a folded slip of paper with a false appointment time scribbled on it. I didn't even look. I shoved it into my pocket where it joined the recorder already running. Andrew grabbed his car keys. Let's go, Dad. We'll take separate cars and meet there. Melissa opened her mouth to protest. She didn't want me alone with him. But at that moment, Lucy wandered in, rubbing her eyes. Mom, why are you yelling? I'm not yelling, sweetheart. Melissa softened instantly. Go finish getting ready for school. Lucy hugged me around the waist before running upstairs. Bye, Grandpa. You'll be okay. Melissa's expression tightened. She knew Lucy was slipping from her influence. We stepped outside. Andrew took me in his car. Melissa followed in hers. As soon as we pulled out of the driveway, I murmured, Son, we're not going where your wife thinks. He blinked at me. What, Dad? What are you talking about? We're going to my appointment, I said quietly. The real one. His hands tightened on the wheel. Dad, I don't understand. You will? I guided him to Halden's building. It was clinical and cold. The type of place where people walked in with hope and walked out with diagnoses that changed their lives. When we arrived, Melissa wasn't far behind. She parked crookedly, practically leaping out of the car. Why did you come here? She snapped at Andrew. I told you this is the wrong place. Except there was no wrong place. There was only the truth. Inside, the receptionist called my name, and Halden appeared, a tall man in his 50s with graying temples and a practiced, sympathetic smile. Mr. Harper, he greeted me. Come on in. Melissa grabbed his arm. Doctor, I'm his caregiver. We need to discuss his rapid decline. Halden nodded and ushered us in, but Andrew held back, studying him. Dad. Andrew whispered, Are you sure about this watch? I said. Halden closed the exam room door. Melissa launched into her speech before he could speak. He forgets everything she said breathlessly. He wanders at night. He gets aggressive. Last week he gave pills to our neighbor thinking they were candy. That never happened, I said calmly. Melissa's head whipped toward me, shock flashing across her face. Halden frowned. Mr. Harper, is that true? Andrew looked between us, confused, uncertain. Melissa smiled tightly. He doesn't remember. That's the point. I held her gaze unblinking. I remember perfectly. The doctor jotted something down. Let's do a short assessment. He began with simple questions, date, name, location. I answered without hesitation. He moved on, recall sequencing spatial tasks. I performed cleanly. Melissa's smile faltered. Sometimes he has good moments, she said quickly. But most days I have recordings, I said, cutting her off. Andrew looked sharply at me. Recordings, I reached into my jacket and slid the small recorder onto the table. Halden hesitated. Mr. Harper, press play, I said. He did. Melissa's voice filled the room instantly. Once he's admitted, we can move forward? No, he won't fight it. He barely knows where he is these days. Andrew's face drained of color. Melissa lunged forward. That's not, he misunderstood. Another recording followed automatically. Her voice again lower, colder. By New Year's, he'll be ready. We just need 2 more evaluations. Andrew stared at her betrayal creeping over his features like a tide. Melissa, he whispered. What is this? She stammered. I was taken out of context. I opened the folder. I had brought copies of forged signatures, sedative-laced prescription labels, doctored schedules, emails she thought she deleted. Halden's face shifted from surprise to horror. Mrs. Harper, he said sternly, you told me these symptoms were extreme and daily. Oh, they are, she insisted weakly. You should see him when... He's fine, Andrew said hoarsely. He's answering every question. He's sharper than I've seen him in months. Her breath hitched. Halden removed his glasses. Mrs. Harper, did you falsify information in the forms you submitted? Melissa's voice broke. I did it for us, for our family. For us, Andrew repeated, stepping back. You tried to put my father in a facility? You drugged him? You forged his name? What were you planning next? She burst into tears, reaching for him. Andrew, please listen. He stepped away. Dad, he whispered, voice trembling with remorse. I'm so sorry. I nodded softly. I know, son. Halden cleared his throat. Mr. Harper, I am required to report this immediately. Melissa froze. Report what she whispered. Suspected abuse, medical fraud, Intentional harm. Her face twisted. No, you can't. You don't understand. She turned to Andrew, desperate, frantic. I did it for you, for our life, for Lucy. For Lucy, he repeated, horrified. You expect me to believe you endangered my father to protect our daughter? She didn't answer, because there was no excuse left. Security was called. Halden stayed with me until officers arrived. Melissa's sobs echoed through the hall as they escorted her out of the building. Andrew, she cried. Andrew, help me. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. The officers shut the door behind them, muffling her voice. The silence that followed felt like an earthquake had passed, and I was waiting to see what remained standing. Halden placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll ensure your safety from here. This won't happen again. Andrew sat beside me, tears in his eyes. Dad, how did I not see this? I reached for his hand. You trusted her. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. He bowed his head. But the moment wasn't over, not yet. Because when we returned home that evening, a white envelope was taped to the front door. Andrew peeled it off, opened it, and froze. Inside was a property listing, a photo of our house, and across the top in bold red letters, sold. My pulse went cold. Andrew met my eyes. Dad? She already filed the transfer. The house, the one my wife and I built, was already in motion. And Melissa hadn't acted alone. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a conspiracy. And the real architect of it hadn't shown his face yet. Andrew stared at the sold sign as if it were a gun pointed at his chest. His hands trembled, the paper shaking between his fingers. I took it gently from him and felt the cold certainty settle into my bones. Melissa hadn't just been planning to remove me. She'd already moved to erase me. The house was the last thing Eleanor and I built together. The memory of her laughter lived in its walls. The thought of it being taken sold while I was still breathing made something deep inside me flicker to life, sharp and bright. This isn't over, I said quietly. Andrew swallowed hard. Dad, how did she do all this without me knowing? Because you trusted her, I whispered. She counted on that. He pressed his hands to his face. I feel like a fool. You're not, I said. You were manipulated, and she's not working alone. His eyes met mine, filled with guilt and dawning fear. Who, Dad? Who's behind this? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped inside the house, holding the envelope as if it were evidence from a crime scene. Which of course it was. Andrew followed, closing the door behind us. The house felt tense, like it was holding its breath. I opened the red binder I'd taken from Melissa's room and placed it on the dining table. Andrew hovered behind me, eyes scanning the pages as I turned them. There were financial projections, life insurance forms, a calendar marked with significant dates, and then tucked inside one sleeve, a printed email. From M. Holloway. Investments. Subject contract transfer confirmed closing Feb 1st. Funds in escrow. Andrew read the name aloud. M. Holloway. Who is that? Someone she didn't want you to know about, I replied. Someone who stood to gain everything if I disappeared. Andrew sank into a chair. Dad, this is serious. Yes, I said. It is. Before we could continue, headlights swept across the front window. A car pulled into the driveway. For a brief moment, fear tightened my chest. Had Melissa sent someone? But a second later, Detective Reyes stepped out, her badge glinting under the porch light. Andrew opened the door before she knocked. Detective? She nodded. Mr. Harper, we need to talk. We gathered around the dining table while she reviewed the binder's contents. Her brows knit tighter with each page she turned. This is bigger than we thought, she murmured. Melissa's role is clear, but someone else orchestrated the financial side. Someone experienced. Mark Holloway, I asked. Reyes nodded slowly. He's connected to multiple real estate scams, elderly homeowners pressured into signing over property. He usually works with a partner who handles other forms of persuasion. Drugging, I said. Her eyes flicked to mine. Sometimes worse. Andrew shuddered. What do we do? First, Reyes said we put the property transfer on hold. I've already filed an emergency freeze with the county. Second, we figure out what Melissa handed over and what Holloway is planning next. She opened her notebook. Did she ever mention a safety inspection or someone coming to evaluate the house? I froze. Yes, I said slowly. She mentioned an evaluation scheduled after Christmas. Reyes tapped her pen on the table. That's him. Holloway has posed as a home inspector before. It gives him access to the property, to the homeowner. It's a setup. Andrew's face drained of color. A setup for what? For forced compliance, Reyes said flatly. If the owner resists signing papers, accidents happen. I felt the air thin around me. She wasn't just trying to commit me, I whispered. She was preparing the house for something worse. Reyes met my eyes with grim understanding. I think she wanted you gone, Mr. Harper. Permanently. And Holloway was going to finish the job. The room fell silent. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd endured in months. Melissa had used my vulnerability, my grief, to dismantle my life, piece by piece, but she'd also invited a predator into the house Eleanor and I had built. Reyes closed the binder and stood. We'll need a full timeline of everything, every dose, every fog episode, every document. It strengthens the case. I've kept records, I said, detailed ones. She nodded approvingly. Good. That will help us dismantle the conspiracy. Just as she turned to leave, she paused. One more thing. We pulled security footage from a neighbor's camera. Holloway's sedan drove past your house 3 times the day Melissa was arrested. My breath stilled. He knows, I whispered. Yes, Reyes said. And he's not going to like that his investment is collapsing. After she left, Andrew sank into the couch, burying his face in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I ever... God, how did this happen? I sat beside him. Son, she deceived you not because you were weak, but because you were good. Good men don't expect knives from the people they love. His voice cracked. I should have protected you. No, I said, we protect each other. That's what families do. We sat there in the dim light, the weight of the truth settling between us. A slow, painful healing began in the silence, but it wasn't over yet. That evening, Lucy crept into the study where I was organizing documents for Reyes. She sat beside me, legs dangling from the chair. Grandpa, she whispered. Mom called Dad today, from jail. My stomach clenched. What did she say? She said you were lying, that you tricked her. I exhaled steady and controlled. What do you think? Lucy looked up at me with eyes too wise for her age. I think you're telling the truth, and I think Mom is scared. I nodded. She should be. Lucy leaned her head on my arm. Are we safe now? I hesitated. We're safer. But we need to stay together, all right. She nodded quietly. That night, as the house slept, I walked through the hallways with a sense of both victory and dread. The illusions Melissa had painted over my life were gone, stripped bare. But in the spaces she left behind, darker truths had emerged. Holloway wasn't just after my property. He was after whatever Melissa had promised him. And Melissa wasn't just desperate. She was angry now. People like her, people who depended on their lies as oxygen didn't break cleanly when caught. They splintered. They lashed out. They tried to reclaim the narrative. As I stared out the window into the quiet, moonlit street, I felt a spark of the old strength Eleanor used to tease me about. They underestimate you, she'd say, smoothing my collar before dinner parties. But you see everything. I hadn't seen everything. not soon enough. But I saw it now. And I would not let Holloway or anyone else steal the last pieces of my life. In the early hours of the morning, while the rest of the house slept, I gathered the jars, the recordings, the footage, the forged documents, all of it, and placed it into one large folder labeled plainly for Detective Reyes. Evidence, truth, light. Because the people who hunted seniors thrived in darkness. And dawn was coming, for all of us. The morning of the hearing felt strangely calm, as if the world itself had paused to listen. I woke before sunrise and sat in the quiet kitchen with a cup of plain coffee, the kind I brewed myself. Now the kind that didn't steal hours from my life. Andrew joined me a few minutes later, his hair still damp from the shower, his eyes tired but steady. "You ready, Dad?" he asked. "As ready as a man can be," I said. He nodded. Neither of us spoke about what this day meant, not the judgment on Melissa, not the dismantling of Holloway's network, not the weight of everything we had survived. Some truths were too large for casual words. Lucy came downstairs next, wearing her favorite green sweater. She hugged me gently as if afraid I might break. "You'll be okay," she whispered. "Grandpa always wins." I smiled, not always. But today, I'll try. The drive to the courthouse was silent. Snow fell in light powdery flakes soft enough to coat the windshield without obscuring the view. It felt like the world was being dusted clean. Inside the courthouse, the air hummed with a low procedural tension. Voices echoing, heels clicking, papers rustling. Detective Reyes met us near the courtroom. "Everything's in place," she said. "Holloway's already been transferred from county holding. Melissa will be brought in shortly." Andrew exhaled shakily. "I still can't believe she got involved with someone like him." "She didn't find him by accident," Reyes said. "Men like Holloway know exactly who to target. He needed someone close to the victim. She needed someone to execute the parts she couldn't." I felt a cold shiver, not from fear, but from recognition. There had been moments, quiet moments, when I had nearly trusted the fog more than my own instincts. When I wondered if perhaps age was stealing me faster than grief. Holloway had counted on that crack in me. Melissa had widened it. And now we would close it for good. When we entered the courtroom, the first person I saw was Holloway. He wore a navy suit that probably looked sharp on the website where he lured investors, but here it sagged around the shoulders. His hands were cuffed. His eyes flicked toward me with a cold calculation, as if he were assessing whether I would break on the stand. He didn't know me. Then Melissa was brought in. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pinned hastily, her hands trembling, her eyes darting between Andrew and me. For a brief moment, her face softened into something almost human, almost remorseful. But when Andrew looked away, that softness curdled into bitterness. She realized she'd lost the audience she cared about most. The judge entered. Everyone rose. And then the long machinery of justice began its slow, deliberate grind. Reyes presented the evidence with surgical precision, my video recordings, the drug analysis, the forged signatures, the real estate documents, the emails between Melissa and Holloway. The room murmured when the footage played of Melissa whispering to Holloway about accelerating the plan. I watched Holloway's jaw clench. Melissa blinked rapidly, tears clinging to her lashes. Then it was my turn. I took the stand with my notebook in hand, not because I needed it to remember, but because it had become a symbol of what had saved me. Clarity, detail, truth recorded. Even when my world was being distorted. I told the court what the fog had felt like. The confusion, the shame, the humiliation of being spoken over spoken for diminished piece by piece. People leaned forward not out of pity, but because the story was theirs too. A father, a grandmother, a neighbor. Someone they had watched fade too quickly, too conveniently. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Melissa's attorney whispered something to her, but she didn't hear it. She was staring at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time, as if she had expected me to crumble in that chair, to forget my words, to forget myself. But I didn't. I had already survived her erasure once. I would not do it again. Then, the judge spoke, voice firm, measured, almost weary with the weight of the verdicts he had delivered through the years. He found Melissa guilty on all counts: elder abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted unlawful confinement. He sentenced her to 4 years in state prison with mandatory restitution and psychological evaluation. She sobbed. Andrew closed his eyes. Lucy squeezed my hand. But then it was Holloway's turn. His charges were even broader: real estate fraud, exploitation of vulnerable adults, interstate conspiracy, money laundering. When the judge listed them, Holloway didn't flinch. He simply crossed his arms, as if the whole thing were an inconvenience. Until sentencing. 10 years, the judge said, with no eligibility for early release. Holloway's mask cracked then, just for a second. But I saw it. By the time the gavel fell, I felt no triumph, only a quiet release. A loosening of the knot that had lived inside my chest for months. Justice didn't erase the pain. It simply put it in its rightful place, behind me. Outside, reporters waited. They asked questions about the case, about scams, targeting seniors, about how families could protect themselves. I answered what I could and referred them to Detective Reyes when I couldn't. One reporter asked what I planned to do now. I looked at Andrew, at Lucy, at the courthouse steps gleaming under the pale winter sun. I plan to live, I said simply, and help others live safely too. Over the next few months, life reshaped itself, not into what it had been, but into something steadier, something honest. Andrew and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, with long talks and quiet dinners and shared work in the garden. Lucy came by every weekend for chess and hot chocolate. The house no longer felt haunted by threat. It breathed again. I donated part of the damages awarded to a senior advocacy center. I joined their board. I taught workshops on recognizing coercion, on documenting abuse, on fighting back before it's too late. The people who attended weren't helpless. They were simply alone, until someone told them they weren't. And as the seasons changed, I found myself healing too. Not by forgetting, but by choosing what to carry forward. One evening, as the sun set over the snow-dusted yard, Andrew asked Dad, "Do you ever regret exposing everything? The marriage, the fallout, everything that came after?" I took a long breath, feeling the cold air settle warm inside me. "No," I said, "because truth doesn't break families. Lies do. And sometimes the only way to save what's left is to burn away what's rotten." He nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, he smiled openly at me. "Now, if you've walked with me this far, if you've stayed through every twist, every betrayal, every moment of fog and clarity, then I want to thank you. Stories like mine aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. They're lanterns for the next person walking a dark road. And I hope you'll stay with this channel, because the more we talk about these things, elder abuse, manipulation, hidden conspiracies, the fewer people will fall victim to them. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what part struck you the most, or what lesson you're taking with you. Our community grows through your voice, and together we make sure no one faces their battles alone.